pursue her, get back into the game of remembering, why did I fall in love with her, and what did I do to make her feel heard, valued, seen, and loved? Because that's really what we all want. When we feel seen, valued, heard, and loved, we don't feel lonely. So when we feel lonely, it's because those things are absent.
So today we're going to talk about something that's so important in this day and age, and that's loneliness. And you've written a book on loneliness, a much needed book. And specifically in that book, you talk about a report from the U.S. Surgeon General in 2023 about how many people are feeling lonely in our world today. What were some of the report's conclusions?
Yeah, it was crazy, actually. 1 in every 2 Americans are feeling significantly lonely and isolated at least once a week.
Wow.
I read another report that said 63% of all adults are feeling lonely, whether they're married or single, and most of these were married. And that loneliness has increased things like anxiety, depression. It's as dangerous to our physical health, actually, as smoking 15 packs of cigarettes a day.
Wow.
I think that's shocking.
Wow, that is.
Yes, it is shocking.
That's a perspective, all right.
Yeah. So it's really hurting us. And we have to figure out this thing called loneliness. And loneliness really isn't the absence of people. It's feeling disconnected from those people. And I think that's what's key.
For sure.
And what happened? What creates kind of that feeling of disconnect?
When you feel disconnected from somebody, you feel isolated, even if you're sitting right next to somebody,
We can be laying in the same bed
and
feeling a million miles away from each other.
Yeah. And you just feel like you're not understood, or maybe nobody really cares. And so then it kind of spirals into anxiety and depression and a lot of fear. And it can spiral into addictive behaviors, trying to anesthetize that ache of loneliness. A lot of people run from it, hide from it, or they anesthetize it with something.
Or they deny it.
Yeah.
And the bottom line, I say so many times throughout the day when I'm sitting with individuals or couples, that we're created to be connected.
Yes.
And so when we're feeling lonely, it's against the absolute design that God gave us, and that's to be connected. And we all deal with that vulnerability of being connected in different ways.
Yeah, we totally do. And exactly what you said, Erin, God created us in his image, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, living in eternal community. It's beautiful. And we're created in his image. So when we're not living in community, when we don't have those deep connections, we're going to feel isolated because it goes against how we were designed.
Right.
Is there sort of like a line? Because certainly we're probably all not going to feel completely connected all the time. I'm an introvert.
Yeah.
And so I always joke and say, I hate people and I don't need that connection.
He says he has friends because his extroverted wife sets him up on play dates.
With other men, Yes. But I imagine it's okay to feel lonely at times. What's kind of the distinction between, okay, this is past a certain point?
That's a great question. I think first of all, when you feel lonely, you should view it as an invitation to reconnect with God first and foremost, because he's our
there.
deepest place of attachment, right? But I think for introverts and extroverts, it might look a little differently.
Oh, yeah. So Erin's always going for coffees and
yes.
Every night it's like, hey, don't worry about cooking dinner. I'm going to be out with so and so.
Yes,
not every night.
Like
I still
twice
like to be
a night.
home.
And it's always funny because there's a part of me that's like, cool, I get to be alone.
Yeah.
I get to just chill. But there's got to be though a line where that
It
probably
becomes
becomes
unhealthy.
unhealthy for me.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And so I think, for extroverts, we need a lot of people, right? I mean, I get to know people most of the time on planes, whereas my husband puts in his earphones and
horrifying.
sends an
Yeah.
immediate signal that he's going to
the
sleep.
greatest spend on money that I've ever done is a
Right.
Bose noise canceling headphones.
Right, right.
We say, okay, he's done talking. Who am I going to talk to now?
Yes,
You
yes.
got your
yes.
seatmate. What are you talking
Yes,
about? On the
yes.
other side.
But
Yeah.
even as an extrovert, I need times alone too. I need
Yeah.
times of silence where I can be creative, where I can be with God, where I can, dream about what's next. But while it looks different for introverts and extroverts, introverts might have a few really good friends.
Yeah, which I do. Yeah, for sure.
Extroverts might have more really close friends. But either way, you've got to feel connected to people.
Do
'Cause
invisible
again,
friends count, by the way?
Invisible friends?
Yeah.
No, I don't think
don't?
so, Greg.
There went two of my friends. Then. Yeah.
But I think extroverts have their, because I always admire introverts' depth in their
Yes.
friendship, and extroverts, we have lots of them, but sometimes they're not very deep, or maybe they're deep for a moment and then you're with the next one, and so it's a different. I think there's different challenges for either one.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There was a season, I probably, my husband would say I lean more extroverted.
Okay.
He leans more introverted. But we're both great at meeting people. So, and one of the things is, if I go out and speak, I love speaking, right? So then people think, oh, she's my best friend.
Yes.
So then I
Then they
meet
wanna
all those
talk to you
people and I
in the
love them all,
breaks.
but I
Yeah.
can't sustain all those
Right.
relationships, right? But as an extrovert, we go a little shallower
Right.
until and I think we need a wake-up call a little bit about that and just say, okay, there are some people that I'm going to go really deep
Right.
with.
To be fully known.
Yeah.
And especially
Yes.
here in marriage, to be fully known.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for the introverts like me, like what's that point to where that desire to have alone time, or that desire to decompress, recharge by ourselves, like when does that become unhealthy? Kind of endangering the way God created us to be in that connection with others.
I think you have to look internally for that. I think you have to say, okay, I have a desire to be alone, so that's a good thing. That means you probably need some time with God and time in silence and time to think and dream. But then when you start feeling that inner angst or that inner anxiety, like, oh, I wonder what Erin's doing, or I wonder what this person's doing, or I
She's
wonder
with
what this
someone.
person's
That's what
doing.
she's doing. Yeah.
You always know what I'm doing because I'm
That's
always
a
telling
signal
you.
you need to reconnect.
Gotcha.
And I think that's the same for introverts or extroverts. There are bodily signals. I think anxiety, fear. If you find fear rising, that's usually a signal something's a little off kilter.
Yeah.
Kind of
Yeah.
feeling of actually
Exhaustion.
being lonely. Yeah. There's times where I do feel that way.
Yeah.
Where I'll look around and go, okay, it's been nice to have a little bit of time by myself, but I wonder what Erin's doing. I wonder what the kids
Yeah.
are doing. And
Yeah.
give them a call.
Do you think this is a generational thing? Do you believe that the next generations deal with more loneliness than, say, our generation?
Actually, that Surgeon General's report, this was shocking to me. The loneliest generation are those that are 18 to 25.
Really?
And I found that really surprising.
Yeah,
I
why
would
is
have
that?
thought it was
Yeah.
the elderly, and the elderly run
Yeah.
a close second, But I think what's happened with the 18 to 25-year-old generation is they're so used to screens and media and texting and short answers and, everything's a soundbite, that perhaps they have forgotten how to sit in a room with a person, look eye to eye,
Right.
and have a deep connecting conversation.
Yeah.
That's a great
And as a
point, yeah.
result, anxiety and depression is at an all-time high for the 18 to 25-year-olds.
Yeah. Yeah. And really, we have worked with our kids so much around asking great questions.
Yes.
So, because when you ask questions and you show interest in someone else, they're more likely to connect with you. They're drawn
Yes.
to you. And often we don't ask good questions and we don't listen well.
Yeah. And that is the key to good conversations, you know?
How then does maybe loneliness show up differently for someone who's married? So if we're thinking about someone who's single, it's probably going to look a little bit different for someone who's married, because I will say that I think that was part of the myth that I bought into early in our marriage, always thinking, I married my best friend. Like,
Yeah.
I will never feel lonely ever again.
Yeah, I think we all thought that, you know, and I don't know about you guys, but Steve and I got married pretty young. And
Which is how old? What's
like
young
we
to
were
you?
like 21,
Okay,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
and
That's
went right
decently
into
young.
23,
ministry.
24.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember a wake-up period in my own marriage where Steve was really busy in ministry. You know, he was pastoring at that time a large church, a lot of demands on him. I was home with the kids a lot, and I loved my kids.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking, I am really lonely. I need him here more, you know. But as a result of that loneliness in our marriage, I began to put too much pressure, I think, on Steve. Like, no, I don't really want you to go to that meeting. No, I don't really want. And I, in some
what
ways,
about
was
me?
holding him back.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I really went deeper in the love of God and began to realize, hey, God is always going to be the one that's going to meet my deepest love needs. And then I started loving Steve out of the overflow of a full heart. And that changed everything in our marriage.
I love that. One of our very favorite authors, besides you.
Oh, good. I'm glad you
say
said
you're
that.
number one. So number two, Gary Thomas.
Yes.
And I remember hearing him one time talk about this idea that we have been as individuals fully loved by
Yes.
God. Like we don't have this hole in our heart
Yes.
to where we need to figure out how to get our spouse or someone else to fill that. Which the what I loved about that is that it really helped me to go, yeah, that's true, is that God has met that need fully. And therefore my job is then to love versus to find, to get Erin maybe to love me in a way that I'm thinking she needs to be doing. And you're right, that's a powerful understanding, a powerful awareness to go, yeah, I'm completely loved.
It really is. And I think for a lot of people, they come to marriage with attachment issues.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, Steve and I both came with attachment issues.
I did, for
I
sure.
grew up in a crazy home, ministry home, but a very, very crazy home. So I had a lot of attachment issues. Steve grew up as a missionary kid, went to boarding school at like age 6 or 7, had all kinds of attachment issues. So we both did. We both had to find that our deepest attachment is going to be with God. Emmanuel, God with us. And so when we find our deepest attachment with God, then again, we're secure enough to give of ourselves and to create this thing called a healthy marriage, you know?
That's good.
In the very connection, this is what I always geek out about, that, God created marriage, and he also created this place that brings healing
Yes.
to these attachment issues. As we become secure in our attachment and do intentional things to build that, it brings healing to our individual attachment wounds that we walk in to the marriage. So I just love thinking only God could have done that.
I know.
Knowing that we would come with
it's part
this
of the
stuff.
design feature of marriage.
Right. It's really a beautiful thing, and God takes two people that are, very different, right? I mean, Steve was Mr. Adventure, still is. I call him my jungle boy. He grew up in Africa. He loves adventure.
Wow.
I really valued security. So you can see how sometimes that would create some loneliness for both of us, you know.
For sure.
And so for Steve to feel deeply connected to me, I have to be able to do some crazy things with him, like get on ATVs in Costa Rica or ride mud jeeps through the jungle, all of which I've done.
Good old zip line.
I haven't done that yet.
Let's go parachuting.
Right.
next.
I mean, he is always up for the next adventure. And for me to feel more attached to Steve, he's had to realize, okay, I need to help Becky feel secure. So, maybe in my life, that looks like him checking my tires or the oil in my car before he takes off for Africa again, just to make sure I'm set.
Yeah. So what do you say to that couple? Let's say it's me and I go to Greg and say, I'm feeling really lonely. Whose responsibility is it? Is it Greg's responsibility to change a bunch of things to meet me there, or is it my job to take care of me?
I think it's both. I mean, I don't know what you all answered would be, but I would say, first of all, you, if you're feeling lonely, need to do some internal looking and think and ask yourself, why am I feeling lonely? You know, what am I feeling that's lacking? You know, and maybe it's that Greg is really busy right now. Okay, this is just a season. He's going to get back, you know, it will pass. We'll have time, or maybe we're going to go on a vacation or whatever. You know, but do some internal checking. Do I need more time with the Lord? Do I need more time in prayer? Do I need to go out with a girlfriend? Because our girlfriends feel a need in us that our men, no matter how hard they try, just can't.
Right.
You know, yesterday I asked Steve
Yeah.
a question, actually. I was coming here for a different interview, and I'm like, okay, should I button my jacket or leave it open? He goes, you know me better than
Why
that.
would I
have
know that?
no answer.
Yeah.
Call your friends.
Like,
If
that's
it was
when
for
you
a
need your
zip line, he would have had the right answer.
Right,
but,
exactly. He would know the
Yeah,
equipment I
exactly.
need.
Oh,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
But it's also, in a healthy marriage, you should be able to say, hey, I'm feeling lonely. This is what I need. You know, I remember when Steve said that to me and said, you know, I just need you to go hiking with me more. And I wouldn't have thought of that. I would have thought of something else, you know.
Because I like what you're saying, because certainly just that busyness, the lack of time together, just we're away from one another. What else creates sort of that loneliness? Because I'm like, for me, I was thinking about, there are times where Erin will talk about feeling lonely, not because I'm not around, but more because she doesn't feel maybe that I'm pursuing to know her, maybe not connecting emotionally. Is that another big reason why people feel lonely in marriage?
For sure. And I think we have to bring empathy back into marriage. You know, I think sometimes as marriage partners, one will feel lonely and the other will look at them like, well, why in the world do you feel that way? You know, that doesn't connect with me.
Yeah.
But rather, it's so much healthier, so much wiser to be able to look at your partner and say, wow, that your feelings really make sense to me, and I'm understanding what speaks to you is maybe more time with you, or more adventure with you, or more physical attachment with you, whatever they need. But offering that gift of empathy to each other, I think, is huge. And I think that's what Paul gets at when in Romans, when he says, rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep.
Yeah. Just show up, be present.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so good. And in the book, you talk about, in order to move past loneliness, we need to release our critical spirit, tame envy and comparison. So what do you say? How does someone do that if they recognize, like, oh my word, I've been so critical, especially in marriage?
Especially in marriage. I was going to say that, you know, I think a critical spirit has destroyed more marriages. You know, no matter who you marry, they are not going to be the exact clone of you. And so they're going to do things differently. There's going to be a slightly different value system. There's going to be, you know, different ways of housekeeping, or different ways of getting jobs done around the house. And I think what often happens is that one partner or the other just sees and finds everything wrong with the other. You know, I've heard of husbands who criticize their wives' weight, and I think that's the dumbest thing probably you could ever
Not
do.
gonna take you far.
Right.
Amen.
That's not a good thing,
it's
guys,
not.
ever.
Yeah. Just
And then
don't.
I've heard of wives criticizing everything about their husbands. You know, a group of girlfriends will go out together and they're ragging on their spouses.
Knew it.
And
Always suspected.
never
Glad to
Aaron.
know
Only
that.
brag.
Never Aaron.
Yeah.
But I think we have to watch that critical spirit, because Jesus had some pretty hard things to say about that. You know, he said we're not to judge one another.
Yeah.
We're not to judge our partner if they forget things. We're not to judge our partner if they view life a little differently than we do.
Yeah.
We've got to let go of that critical spirit. And then comparing gets us in huge trouble. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, not to pick on social media, because, yeah, it serves a purpose. It's here to stay. But you have wives that are sitting home and they're scrolling Instagram or TikTok, and they're wondering, well, why doesn't my husband bring me those kinds of flowers? Or why doesn't my husband take care of the kids like
'cause we
this?
see the
Why
best
doesn't my
moments.
husband go out on a date with me? My husband's always off somewhere. And so when you're comparing like that, that's going to raise envy in you, and that's not healthy. And so I like to tell wives when I talk with them and they're into this comparison game, sit down, remember why you married your spouse, and
So powerful.
make a list of all the things that you love and appreciate about him. Because he's not going to be like the husband down the street, but he's your husband. He's your man. So think the best of him.
So how kind of coach for that person who's going, I do feel lonely and I do feel like I need to bring that up. Maybe we've been ignoring it, avoiding that conversation. So what's the best way to have that with your spouse?
I love
Because you
that
could certainly
question.
lead with, I'm
Yeah.
I'm lonely and it's your fault.
Your
You've been
fault,
gone for
right.
whatever.
Yeah.
So what's the best way to have that to where it actually accomplishes maybe what we're hoping for, which
I
that
think
connection?
you have to have some pretty tight rules around
Okay.
yourself.
Yeah. What would that
First
look
of
like?
all, I think before you have any conversation like that, you need to spend significant time in prayer.
Okay.
Just asking the Holy Spirit to bring your heart and your mind and your emotions into alignment with his.
good.
So start there.
Yeah.
And then pick the right time of day. I mean, Steve and I decided early on in our marriage that we're both pretty worthless late at night. So
Yeah.
there's a ground rule in our marriage. We're never going to talk about finances or friction between us at night because we can't handle that. We're not going to think clearly.
good.
So
Yeah. Because people
choose-
hear don't let the sun go down on
Right,
your.
right.
Yeah, they hear issues there.
Yes.
Not anger.
Right.
And it's not meant to be a stay up all night.
No,
discussing your issues.
No,
Yeah.
that would never work in
No.
our
Right.
home.
Or
Right.
ours.
Totally.
I'm worthless past 6 p.m. now. as
Yeah.
I'm aging.
It's getting earlier and
So, yeah.
earlier.
It is getting earlier and
Yeah,
earlier
right.
for us too. But
Yeah.
but there's beauty in that, right? And so you choose the right time. And maybe you prepare your spouse. You say, hey, I have some things on my mind. Can we talk?
Yeah.
Ask the
Of course,
question.
that instantly triggers me because all I hear is you've screwed up. I'm going to walk you through how you
Can
failed.
we talk?
So Aaron has learned. Poor Aaron has learned to text. It takes a few texts
Yes,
between
To
us.
ease him into it.
Yes.
Yes,
And then
yes.
she's like, "So why don't we then talk tonight?" Yeah. And by then
Yes,
I'm
yes.
like,
Let's talk about
But that's
this.
great. So a heads up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Spend some time
Yeah.
in prayer, figuring out. It's almost like that prayer time of going, well, let me separate out what are my issues versus, maybe something that's important that we need to figure out here as a couple.
And I would say drop the words always and never
Yeah.
out of your conversation.
Yes,
You
you're
always
never
are
around.
gone.
Yeah.
You're
Yes.
never around.
Yes.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
are fighting words.
Yeah,
and
that's
and
true.
the goal isn't to fight. The goal is to come to a better space that works for a strengthening of your relationship for both of you. And so you have to deal with it wisely. And I will say it takes time. I mean,
Yeah.
Steve and I have been married now for 45 years. So
Congratulations.
yeah, we're
Yeah.
figuring this out, but it takes time, right?
It does.
As you guys probably know.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Complete.
We're hitting 33 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I hear you describing, Becky, is humility.
Yeah.
Like as you go to your spouse, go with a humble heart. So
Yeah.
often I'll even say to myself, what would humble Aaron say? Because
Yes.
when we're angry, when we're triggered, we're not humble, we're prideful. How do you think humility helps with loneliness and specifically in marriage?
Oh, humility is so important in marriage. I always go back to that passage in Philippians 2. And I think it's the best passage biblically for marriage, because Paul writes, have this attitude in yourself, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, even though he existed in the form of God, didn't regard equality with God something to be grasped, but emptied himself and became a bondservant, and humbled himself.
And do
I
nothing out of
think-
selfish ambition.
Right. Yeah. Look
Yeah,
to
to
your
others.
to the
Yeah.
interests of others. others.
Yeah.
And that's marriage, right? And so, it plays out in small ways, and it's something we continually have to work at, Even, I think even in terms of eating, you get a little older and the way you eat changes. The way Steve and I eat is polar opposite. My husband goes for anything high cholesterol, beef, butter,
bacon.
bread, and bacon. Those are his food groups.
The bees.
Not beans, but he goes for beef, bacon, butter, and bread.
That's
right.
The
And
4
I'm
Bs.
like
I
a
love
salad girl. So, now we're in this season of life where the kids aren't home. And I'll say, well, let's just have a salad for dinner. And
he's
Steve
like,
just
why do you
looks
hate me?
Yes, exactly.
What have I done?
He looks like cross-eyed, like what in the world is wrong with you?
Exactly.
And I keep trying to come gently back to this point. Well, we don't need to eat as much as we used to eat, right? But it's just little.
No, I don't agree with that at all. I hear you.
Steve will say,
It makes sense that you feel that way. I can validate that without agreeing with it. Okay.
Yes, but so we bring humility in our marriage where it's like, okay, babe, I'll make you spaghetti with beef, and I'll sit here with my salad.
My
it's
Italian salad.
It's the little things.
The real meatballs. I love it.
Yes.
There you go. See, you do. Love
but
it.
it's the little things. It's where do you want to go on vacation? I might want to be in a posh hotel. My husband, we go to Costa Rica because he loves the jungle. I told you, I call him Jungle Boy. And so, it's the giving to each other. And when we do that, we have the most wonderful time together. And we remember why we fell in love, and there's times of laughter and playfulness. And I think even with humility, bringing the playfulness back to your marriage, don't make everything like a national crisis. You kind of learn through the years to take things a little less seriously,
So for that person who's sensing that loneliness and just the disconnect maybe in the marriage, what's a great place to begin to, create that reconnection?
Yeah, I would say take an interest in your spouse.
Okay.
And really study them. What do they like to do? If you're married to somebody that loves sports, you put away whatever you're doing and watch sports with them. If
I paid her. I paid Becky good money to say that right now.
Okay.
It wasn't me. It was
Sometimes
Becky
I do.
who said that.
Sometimes I do. I've been watching a lot of basketball
That's true.
lately.
You have been.
Yeah, or if it's you realize that you're feeling lonely from your wife, pursue her. Get back into the game of remembering, why did I fall in love with her? And what did I do to make her feel heard, valued, seen, and loved? Because that's really what we all want. When we feel seen, valued, heard, and loved, we don't feel lonely. So when we feel lonely, it's because those things are absent.
Yeah.
So go for them again. Take a small step.
So good.
It reminds me, like in Hosea, so in the Old Testament, the book of Hosea, to where, God, the first 2 chapters, that God's just angry at his bride, the Israelites, and all of a sudden, he's going through all these punishments that he's going to do, and take this away and punish her this way. But then all of a sudden, it's like he just flips a switch and says, no, what, actually, I'm going to win her back. And the first thing that he says to her, or he says he's going to do, is now I'm going to allure her.
Yeah.
And I've always loved that as just a language. I'm a fisherman, so I love to fish. So, when I toss a lure, it's shiny and it has all these whatever's going to attract that fish. And I think, to your point, it's you're saying, man, study them, get to know them. And I asked Aaron this one time, what is it that when I do it allures you? What in the midst of all of what competes for her attention, right? Good and bad. We have children, full-time job, all that. There's a lot competing for attention within that. Yeah, what allures you?
Yeah.
And so listening to you, I thought of that.
Well, I love that you brought up that verse, because I was just studying that verse last week.
Really?
And I love that verse too. And so I think sometimes what happens in marriage that creates loneliness is both parties just get so busy, you know.
Just drift.
And you know, a lot of marriages, you're raising kids, and then you got all the sports going, and
Right.
I mean, we did all that. You
jobs
know,
and
you've got
Right.
like
church
the
and-
soccer and
Yeah.
the ballet and the dance and the music and all the things, you
Right.
know, and then you've got church, and if you're in leadership at church. And I think having a weekly check-in is also a really good practice. We told our kids when they got married, go out on a date once a week. And if you can't do once a week, that's okay, but at least check in with each other,
Yeah.
you
Right.
know. So we would go out to coffee on Friday mornings once we got the youngest in preschool and check in with each other. Like,
It's
okay,
so
how
good.
are we doing? How are we doing as us?
Yeah,
you
you're
know?
not saying to have a business meeting to
Right,
talk about the
right.
finances or
That's
whatever.
what happens so often.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. And, you know, for those of us in ministry, it can be like that. Steve will say to me, okay, we have to have a calendar meeting.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, that's a
Yeah.
calendar meeting. That's not
Yeah.
a date or an us meeting.
Yeah,
You know?
that's not a
Yeah.
date activity.
Right,
Right.
It's
right.
the calendar
Yeah.
check in.
Cultivating that deep connection in marriage is really like any other relationship, right? It takes intentionality.
Right.
You can't just be complacent and think, oh, we're going to be here forever, you know?
It's good.
I hear that all the time. Should this be so much work? And I'm like, yes.
Yes.
It is work. It's intentional work.
See, it doesn't
And-
feel like work to me. I don't know what's up with you. But
Yeah, you say that as he's been folding a lot of laundry and
oh, that
cooking
kind
a lot
work.
of
Gotcha.
meals and pursuing and all
I'm
kinds of
joking.
things.
It-
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, we have a lot of fun
Mm-hmm.
in its work, and we have to work at repairing
Yeah.
conflict and
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, making sure we are pursuing to have
Mm-hmm.
those inner life conversations more than the businessy meetings. So,
Right,
but that's
right.
good. I
Yeah.
think that's a great advice. If you're feeling lonely, feeling disconnected,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, what would that little weekly kind of check in to where I'm
Yeah.
going to pursue what's going on in your life
Mm-hmm.
and your heart and
Yeah, and get back to having fun together.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
really funny because Steve and I went on vacation to Costa Rica in January.
yeah,
And,
we're
he
hearing a
ordered-
theme.
I
Yeah,
Yes.
know. I'm sorry.
yeah. When are you
It's my
moving down there?
husband's,
Yeah,
We're not.
Yeah.
Grandkids are here.
Oh, that's
Okay,
fair, that's
yeah,
fair.
that,
But,
that trumps everything.
He ordered this game for us to play together while we were down there, and it's called Trekking the World, which is very Steve, you know. So it has like this whole map of the world, and it's all these different, you know, national parks.
Yeah.
But the funny thing was when we sat down to play it, neither of us are really very good at reading directions, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And so we kept trying, and you know, we ended up just playing the game the way we wanted to play the
There
game.
you go.
But we
not?
ended up laughing so hard that night and just having fun and being silly together, you know? There's enough heaviness.
There is.
There's enough hard work in marriage. I would say bring back the fun. What did you used to like to do together? And start doing that again.
That's great.
Yeah, for sure. We're so thankful you took time
Yes.
out of your day to be with us, to come to Focus 2 days in a row. Such wisdom you have, and just thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, it's been a joy to be with you too. It's been so much fun.